What is the most unexplainable thing that ever happened to you? Years ago, my buddy and a friend of his are out in the boonies, lighting off fireworks for the 4th of July. We go out to the cars to light the stick for igniting the fireworks. As my buddy's buddy is in the car doing so, I look up at all the stars, completely unused to seeing so many. As I'm looking, something just feels off. I finally pinpoint it and start squinting my eyes, looking away and back, everything I can think of to make sure that I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. It's one point of light absolutely identical to the stars around it, except for one weirdness, it's doing a steady, repeating figure 8. I turn to my buddy to ask him about it and I see him staring at the same area of sky, so I ask him, "Do you see what I see?" I hadn't said a word about what I saw, but he answered back, "A star doing a figure 8. I've tried to explain it by any logical means over the years, but nothing quite matches up and I refuse to accept that a figure 8 in space is the alien teenager version of doing donuts in a parking lot. One night, when I was about 16 years old, I swear I glitched into the Matrix or something. I'd finally decided to get off my computer and go to bed, around 2 a.m. if memory serves me correctly. At that time my family and I lived in a decently sized 2-story house. The staircase to the second floor was pretty basic: head up a few steps, turn on a landing halfway up, traverse the remaining few steps, and at the top you're only a couple of footfalls from my bedroom door. Someone please explain to me, then, how I got lost on this fucking staircase. Sure, it was dark, but even then you'd have to be a special kind of stupid to not know how to walk up these stairs after you've already done it 1,000 times before. Just keep one hand on the railing and you don't need to use your eyes. I swear that as soon as I reached the landing I spent 10 minutes just, continually walking upwards. Realistically it only takes someone 5 to 7 seconds to walk up these stairs, 3 if they're running or skipping steps. I realized I'd been walking for much longer than that, stopped, and immediately felt uneasy. I'd walked up those stairs in pitch black darkness so many times before, but even with my hand on the railing I was getting nowhere, just endlessly walking upwards. My fucking skin crawled. If my brother hadn't turned on the upstairs hallway light, I'm not sure I would have made it to my bedroom. Guy blinked sleepily at me and asked me if I was okay, and all I could say was, "I legitimately have no idea." Told him the next day what had happened and he told me that the reason he'd come out of his room in the first place was because he'd heard footsteps on the stairs for several minutes. What the fuck, man? What was that? I wasn't so tired that I just mindlessly walked up and down the stairs for a while. I was completely awake, and not once did it suddenly feel like I'd turned around to walk back downstairs at any time. I still get chills thinking about it. I just got chills. I've wrote about this in another thread but I'll share it again. I'm pretty sure I lived in a haunted house, or at least, someone in my family was haunted. I came home after a miserable day during my teen years once, and because I didn't have my keys, I knocked to have my sister come down. When she opened the door, her eyes were wide with panic. She asks, "Did you just get home?" I said, "Yeah, just now, why?" She starts jumping up and down like she's shaking off spiders and tells me that she's been hearing my voice from my room telling her to come in. I said, "No, I haven't been home all day, did you go in my room?" She said, "No, it was your voice, but I guess, quietly malicious? It just felt off." She then called her boyfriend to pick her up and stayed overnight with him and left me in this creepy situation by myself ______. I didn't hear anything that night though and it was soon forgotten. When I was between 9 and 10 years old I used to play football with my friends every weekend. One day a guy, probably 18 or 19 joins in out of nowhere. He was wearing a karate suit, kimono, and played with us for a while but he didn't know how to play football so he just threw karate kicks all around. Random thing, for some reason I never forgot his face. Fast forward 15 years I'm at college and I see this karate dude walking around and I recognized him immediately. A week after, I decided to take a trip with my girlfriend to a city 3 hours away from home. We go to have a walk around the city and there's Karate Guy again. He was sitting in the grass next to a park kissing with another guy. I thought that was weird and I told my girlfriend about it. She said it was just my imagination. Next week I traveled with my family to our annual vacations on the beach. 2 hours by plane from home. I go party with my cousins to a bar. At some point I go to the door to smoke and guess who came through the door at the exact same time. Our eyes crossed for 3 seconds. Karate Guy didn't recognize me. I was tripping to see him again. Proceeded to call my girlfriend at 3 a.m. to tell her about it. She thought I was becoming insane. I guess coincidences can happen. For me it was just a glitch in the matrix. I then moved to another continent. If I see Karate Guy again I'm going to shit my pants. I was at my parents' staying over for the weekend, and woke up in the morning with the desire to creep on old classmates on FB. There was a girl I kind of liked in band class who was a grade under me who my brother's friends knew, but I never talked to her. I decided to look her up in addition to others on FB to see what she was like now several years on. We graduated from a large high school in suburbs and I hadn't thought of her much since I graduated. A few minutes after seeing her page, the phone at my parents' house rings. I lazily walk over to their phone to see if my parents or brother were phoning. I pick it up and check the caller ID, and in horror I freeze as I read her name on the display. Immediately I begin to think I've done something in error unbeknownst to me while on her FB page, which alerted her to my creeping and has triggered her call. I cannot answer it. I verify the number on the caller ID with FB to see it is indeed her and sit in shock, dumbstruck about how this unlikely event occurred and wondering the reason for it. My brother arrived at my parents a little later and I told him who called. He actually had her number on his cell and he sends her a text asking why she called my parents' place. She responds back that she didn't place a call but that it was just an accidental butt dial. Weird. I was walking to a train station in The Hague at 4 a.m. in order to get to the airport for a flight. I was already on guard when I noticed a man across the street walking in my direction. He crossed the road and turned to walk beside me. Normally this would set all of my alarm bells off, but for whatever reason, he didn't. He asked in English if I was American, which I am, and I said that I was Italian. We then carried on a conversation in Italian until we got to the train station. I said something to the effect of "thank you, and I hope you have a safe trip," and I go inside. I turn around to ask him a question, and realized he hadn't entered the station with me. I walk outside and he'd vanished. This particular train station had no buildings near it and there was nowhere for this individual to go without me seeing him, especially in the very short time we were apart. I walked around for a bit to see if I could see him, but there was no trace of him. I'm not particularly religious, but a holdover from my childhood was saying a prayer for a safe journey before a long car trip. I was just nervous enough that morning to say one, and not 2 minutes later, the man appeared. I've never had any psychic energy. I've never seen a ghost. Shit, I'm not even particularly intuitive with body language. So imagine my surprise when this happened. I was about 25. I was bartending at nights and got home about 2:30 a.m. I hated smelling like stale beer, so I took showers before going to bed. On this night, I sat down on the edge of my bed to take off my shoes. I did not lay down or recline. I didn't go to sleep or close my eyes. With no warning I was in another person's mind, or body, or memory. I was walking down a hallway, like a corridor, bad fluorescent lights above, and a cop was walking with me, escorting me. He was wearing a uniform, not a suit and tie. We got toward the end of the hallway and turned right to walk through double doors. We entered a morgue and there was a doctor inside the room with a body and a sheet over it. There were other stainless steel tables and lots of medical equipment, but only one body. The lighting was almost putrid. Like it had a green or yellow filter on it. No one spoke, but somehow I was aware of the fact that I had to identify the body, The doctor pulled sheet down and showed a young man between 20 and 25. I was only 25 at the time that this happened. But somehow I knew this young man was my son. I started screaming. I mean screaming my fucking head off. I started hitting the cop with my purse. I tried to hit the doctor. I screamed it was their fault my son was dead. The doctor wrapped his arms around me from behind, like a bear hug. And then it was over. The whole thing was less than 90 seconds. When I came back to my own body I was in the same position, sitting, not laying down. On my bed, and my shoes were still on. My heart rate was through the roof. My throat was sore from screaming, but I hadn't made a sound. I never woke up my roommates. I have never experienced anything like that before or since. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I don't know who the woman was, the body I was inhabiting. I don't know if I saw her past, her present, or her future. But it felt like I was an interloper, like I was seeing something that wasn't mine to see. If that's what psychic energy is, fuck it. I don't want it. My truck completely locked up. I couldn't turn the steering wheel, press on the brake or accelerator, change gears, roll down the windows, change the locks, pull the emergency brake, or change the radio station. Nothing. I was trapped in a vehicle that could only be stopped by crashing. And crash it did. I was stuck going 55 miles per hour and my steering wheel was at a 35-degree angle throughout the whole ordeal. I ended up jumping a curb with so much speed that it flew into a wall. The truck actually came off the ground. Once the truck crashed, I was able to unlock the door and witnesses were able to help me out. Nobody believed my explanation. People thought maybe I was suicidal, had a medical emergency, or was intoxicated because I made no visible attempt to stop the truck from crashing. But, I passed field sobriety test and quick medical assessment by EMTs. Police officers thought maybe I was distracted by my phone, but it was in my gym bag behind my seat. To this day, nobody believes me that my truck spontaneously locked up. Especially since it hasn't happened again in the last 3 years. Edit, thanks everyone for the karma. But I am far more grateful for your knowledge and help pinpoint the error. Reddit truly is an amazing community. I've been thinking about this incident all night. I'm a night owl, and I realized this wasn't the first Ford vehicle my family has owned that's had a similar problem. My dad had a 2000 Ford F-150 and the steering column would constantly lock up with the key stuck in the ignition once the truck was turned off. We had to do this weird routine of jiggling the gear shift, tapping the pedals or some shit like that to unlock it. My mom had a 2004 Ford Expedition, which was built on an F-150 platform, had the same exact problem. So what do all 3 Ford vehicles have in common? F-150. Both my wife and I went camping in a campsite area near a desert ghost town. Went on a weekday so there was no one around other than the rangers that stop by near evenings to collect funds. Towards evening a guy in a van decides to camp near us. A whole area to camp and he wants to be cozy. At night during our campfire he was sitting in his van with his back door cracked open just kind of watching. We made a point of noticing him and we kept on enjoying our night. So during the night while asleep I kept hearing someone walking around our tent. It's hard to walk in desert gravel without making a noise. I woke up and sat up suddenly and my wife did the same. As we did that the walking stopped. We both just sat there waiting for the walking to continue, sat there for an hour and no footsteps. Finally had the balls to get out of the tent to investigate and no one was around the tent but the van was still parked at the other campsite. So went back to bed and the next morning the van was gone. What's creepier was there was footsteps all around our tent that did not match ours. I now carry during any camping trips. My husband worked for a small old folks' home. They only had 3 residents and his aunt ran the place. I had college classes nearby and would often come hang out for a few hours at the end of his shift and visit with the residents. One night my husband got the residents to bed and went downstairs to collect his paycheck while I turned off lights. As I reached the top of the stairs, I turned to look into the hallway leading to the residents' rooms. Standing outside the room of one of the residents was a woman. She was wearing an old pale green Victorian-style dress, and had her ear pressed to the door. I opened my mouth to say something, and she looked directly at me, put a finger to her lips and shushed me. I turned and practically fell down the stairs. When I got to the owner's office, she took in the expression on my face and said, "You saw the woman in green?" Not a question. I confirmed and she asked whose room she was interested in. When I told her, she nodded and sighed. The next morning, the owner called us to let us know that the target resident was found comatose in her bed. She passed away later that day. I used to think this occurrence was supernatural, déjà vu, or the similar feeling that literally everything you're experiencing happened in a dream you'd had, until I experienced it while fucked the fuck up on DXM a few times. This was 10 years ago. The first time it happened, I'd taken an entire box of Coricidin and took way too big of a hit off of a bong at my friend's house. We were watching Evil Bong, which I'd never seen before. I wound up in what felt like a perpetual time loop where everything that was happening had already happened, and it lasted for at least 30 to 45 minutes. I panicked because I thought my friends were playing an incredibly evil prank on me, but they genuinely had no idea what I was talking about. I was convinced for a little bit that I'd died and was reliving the night or some shit. It was so scary. I got so scared that I texted my dad in a panic. He came home from a night out with his buddies to comfort me and tell me stories about times he'd gotten too fucked up. He'd never experienced what I was going through, but he had some great stories. It happened to me again a few times after that. I was really going through a dark, rough patch back then and had a serious problem with DXM. It never scared me the same way as it did the first time because I recognized that it was just a trick of the brain. Perpetual déjà vu. Terrifying. I remember reading a cracked article around that time that mentioned a mental illness where people literally live with endless déjà vu, no drugs involved. Most of them kill themselves. I don't blame them, either. Déjà vu is neat when it happens to you in short bursts once in a blue moon, but to never experience anything else sounds like a very special brand of hell. That actually happened to me once. I was with a friend on the subway, and as it pulled into our station my vision suddenly went to black. I grabbed her arm and said, "OMG, I'm blind," and she was obviously like, "WTF," but helped me get off the train. I was like clinging to her and trying not to freak the fuck out. She was starting to get freaked too and I think didn't really know what to do. I mean, what would you do anyway? She had me sit by a wall and went to buy me a bottle of water. By the time she came back my vision was coming back as if someone was turning up a dimmer switch. We were getting picked up outside the station and I passed out in the car, slept for an hour, bizarre in itself as I can never sleep in cars/planes, and woke up feeling normal. It hasn't happened since. That was about 12 years ago and I'm still like, WTF was that? It was so scary. 2 things I'll never be able to explain. Sorry, very long. I was about 7, sitting in the back seat of the family pickup with my 10 and 4-year-old sister driving through the Rocky Mountains in a b, pulling a 30-foot fifth-wheel camper. We rounded a corner in the dark, and there was an oncoming car, so my dad turned the brights off. When we passed the vehicle and turned the brights back on, and there was a massive elk in front of us, in our lane. Somehow, he swerved and missed it. We heard the trailer skipping across the road, went into the oncoming lane, luckily no one was coming, and we missed it. But what I can't explain is I was sitting in the back seat, obviously too small for the front, but I clearly remember seeing the elk from the front seat, eyes glaring at us, and then looking back at my mom sitting between my sisters in the back seat. My dad says I was sitting in the front with him, my mom says I was in the back. I still don't know where I was in the car, and they have yet to agree on it. Secondly, and much scarier, I often, maybe once or twice a month, see dark shadows, everywhere. Started after my second to last major concussion. I woke up to a 10 to 12 foot tall shadow at the end of my bed. I slapped myself, splashed myself with water, and it was still there, so it wasn't a dream. Then it happened while I was driving. A dark shadow ran across the road in front of me. A few months and a major concussion later, they started getting more frequent. In my yard, while walking the dog, even just sitting in the living room. I'm terrified it's CTE, should never have watched the movie Concussion, but I have no other symptoms, no voices in my head, and I'm only 25, so I think it's just my brain being a bit messed up, but I have no idea. It's at the point where they don't even scare me anymore and I am fully conscious when they show up. I just acknowledge they're there and go on with my day. But I have no idea what they are or why they're here.